Well, once again, Roger with Creating with Your Spiritual Universe. CWYSU.com, CWYSU.com. And today I want to talk about a subject that I see a lot of, and it's something that a lot of people are into if you're into astrology, and even people that are not deeply into it. I see this as a major part of their lives, a major part of how they perceive some of the actions and activities going on in their lives. And I just want to propose a different way of looking at things. And what I'm talking about is the alignments and movements of the planets, and in particular when they go retrograde, and the effect that it seems to have on some of us. And when a planet goes retrograde, its literal movement is that all planets, all of our planets go around the sun in one direction, right? They go around the sun in one direction. And I think my camera is turning fuzzy as I move a little, so I'm going to try to stay as still as possible to prevent that from happening, including my hand movement. It's calculating that and trying to gauge the angle and how to make a clear picture. So I'll try to do my best to keep that refocusing process from occurring on the cell phone camera. So just to continue the movement, so as the planet, well, I'll do it like this. So the planet is rotating around the sun. All of our planets in the solar system rotate around the sun. And I'll keep making this movement. So what happens when they go retrograde, literally, is they tend to, while they're in orbit, they're loop back around and create like a little loop, and then continue back in their orbit. And every time they go retrograde, they do this little looping behind and then going back into their regular orbit, the regular direction of their orbit. And every time a planet makes that loop, it is called a retrograde, because at some point in that loop, they're going back. When they first start that loop, they're actually literally going a little bit backwards before they continue to loop forward back into their orbit. And so that little action is what we call retrograde, a planet going retrograde, literally in reverse for a small amount of time in relation to their normal orbital direction. And this tends to have an effect on people. And some may say, well, if you don't believe it, then it won't really affect you. And I'm one of those people. But I have to look at things the way they are. If enough people believe that that is the case, then that is true. So what can we do to prevent this upheaval? Because what happens is those who are affected, for the entire time the planet is in retrograde, everything seems to work in a manner that is completely off. It throws their life off. It throws their schedule off. So what can we do about that? Because I do believe, I do understand, and I've studied astrology. I used to not believe that astrology was a real science. And I was one of those who believed it was a pseudoscience. So generally when I believe something, I tend to want to move it from a belief to a knowing. Because as long as you're in belief, you can be deceived. And until you actually move to investigate, to actually study a little bit about what it is that you believe in, when you make that move, you discover the truth. And when I looked into astrology the first time seriously, by having my birth chart read and looking at my birth chart and really actually studying what each thing in the birth chart and having a general knowledge of astrology, I began to realize that there is something to it, because a lot of what has gone on in my life from the day I was born is written right there in my birth chart. And so something that is false does not stick around like that. That astrology has been around forever. Astrology is mentioned in every great book. For those of you who are deeply religious, it's mentioned in the Quran, it's mentioned in the Torah, it's mentioned in the Bible. I'll give you a couple of examples. In the book of Job, God asked, I forget the scripture, scripture, that's another thing, script. In the book of Job, and I don't remember one, and supposedly Jehovah was asking Job, telling Job he doesn't know as much as he needs to know. And one of the things he mentioned, and he didn't say zodiac, but he mentioned the Hebrew word for zodiac. And he asked Job, do you know about the zodiac? Do you know about the movement of the stars? And you don't know, and if you don't know about the movement of the stars, you don't know enough about anything. That's basically interpreted, that's what Jehovah said to him. And as a part of the knowings, he mentions the zodiac right there in the Bible. So the movement of the stars, the movement of the seasons does have an effect on every one of us. We're all interconnected, including with the stars and the suns and the planets. So to ignore that is to buy into the deception. Because one of the things that I realized and found out when I started to really look deeply into astrology is that those who control this planet understand intimately the movement of the stars, the planet, and every season, and every moon and its effect on us. So you would be doing yourself a disservice if you do not know, in the very least, your birth chart. Your birth chart. Or if you don't have all the information to properly have a birth chart, where you stand in numerology. Okay, the creator of numerology is Pythagoras, one of the greatest mathematicians and scientists ever to live on the planet. Okay, you might say, well, astrology started by the Babylonians, and they believed that the sun, that the earth was the center of the universe. So how could it be real? Let me tell you something. That's already been corrected. Astrology is not a standstill science, and it is a science because it was a science right alongside astronomy up until about 300 years ago, when they decided to separate it out and try to discredit it by calling it a pseudoscience. My friends, if you fall for that one, you'll fall for anything, and that would be a big mistake for you to do, because within astrology are many of the answers to the questions that you're probably asking about in your life. So enough about that, and let's go into what retrograde does and my solution to retrograde. So from a metaphysical and spiritual perspective, when a planet goes into retrograde, it is telling us to go back and fix some of the things in our lives that we either overlooked, ignored, or tried to put away in the corner or in the closet or in the darkness. So those things that we don't want to deal with, that planet going retrograde tells us, go back, you gotta deal with this issue. You have to deal with this. And so when that happens, it's going back to something that we don't really want to deal with. And there, my friends, lies the discrepancy and the torrid experiences that some of us get when planets go into retrograde. So when a planet goes into retrograde, just ask yourself, what is it that I need to deal with? What is it that I ignored? What is it that I'm trying to run away from? And you simply accept that you need to deal with whatever it is. And if you don't know what it is, you just sit quietly with yourself and say, whatever it is that I need to deal with right now, will it please come forward? And don't worry about how it comes forward. It will. And the acceptance of dealing with things that we did not want to deal with in the past is what will take us out of this retrograde oh my gosh, dread that people go through every time a planet does it. Look at it as your friend. The retrograding of a planet is actually a good thing. It is your friend. It is telling you, hey, right over here, this is, if you don't take care of this, it's going to come back to get you. So so when you resist, that is when your life becomes a little bit of a hell during that period of time. If you accept, some say surrender, I say accept, it doesn't matter. If you accept that you're going to deal with what you didn't deal with before, then you're not going to go through that experience of that negative experience, that unpleasurable experience of retrograde, because it is the resistance that causes this back and forth, this discomfort, this upheaval. It is the resistance that causes that. Let's see, my phone's ringing here. Let's stop that from happening. So when one accepts that there is something that that needs to be addressed, and then goes about addressing it, then the resistance that you're putting forward against the tide, because that's what it is, you're resisting the tide of the change. But if you flow with it, then you're in the slipstream of this retrograde, and I propose that you will see a great change. I propose that you will see a great change in what occurs during that time, and you'll look forward to retrograde instead of dreading it. Now, if the retrograde occurs and there's nothing for you to address, fine. Just because it's in retrograde doesn't mean you have something that needs to be addressed. If you're taking care of your stuff on a regular basis, a retrograde shouldn't affect you. What the retrograde should do is that, okay, I'm taking care of stuff. Oh, retrograde is here. Okay, good. It's going to go in line with exactly what I'm doing at this particular point in time, and it's going to assist me to get rid of stuff or make the changes I need to make in a much more quicker, smoother way, because it's going in the direction that I am going at this particular time. So that's my take on it. And just know that just because it's in retrograde, I want to add that doesn't mean that you have something to address. Just be aware of it. And also, if there's also planetary collective consciousness stuff that may not be affecting you or might not have anything to do with you particularly, but with the collective. So in cases like that, you just simply assist the collective. So you're now a part of the positive change and assistance that is happening across the planet, and you're able to assist the collective consciousness from the perspective of your own world. Meaning, you might meditate and put positive energy into the collective just with your intention. It's really easy. Just, I want to send positive vibes. I want to send high frequency. I want to send my energy to assist the planet, assist everyone else to make the changes that they need to make. And that's all you need to do. So there's always something that you can do to assist during that time. So that's my take on planets going into retrograde. Thanks for tuning in. And remember to defy the taboo against finding out who you truly are.